Hello, and welcome to the Debrief from the Business of Fashion, where each week we go deep on our most popular BOF professional stories with the correspondents who created them. I'm Lauren Sherman. Banana Republic sits in a peculiar place in retail pop culture. The Gap Inc.-owned brand first gained notoriety in the 1980s for its safari-inspired out-of-Africa-esque gear. But in the 1990s, it really hit it big with the rise of the metrosexual. If you couldn't afford Jill Sander or Helmut Lang, or even Theory, Banana offered sleek, minimalist office attire at a fraction of the price. And yet, Banana Republic has always played second fiddle to its bigger, more mass-market sister brands, including Gap, Old Navy, and more recently, activewear maker Athleta. So why is BR suddenly the brightest spot in the Gap Inc. portfolio? Retail correspondent Cathaleen Chen is here to explain. Kat, thank you as always for joining me on the Debrief.
I love to be on here with you, Lauren. Thank you for having me.
We talked about the Gap brand a few weeks ago. Tell me, what's happening at Banana Republic, which is also owned by the same company as Gap?
Yeah, so Banana's had two really surprisingly great quarters at a time when pretty much the rest of the portfolio, except for Athleta, Gap and Old Navy are down double digits in sales for the past two quarters, but not Banana. Banana is up. Banana was up 24% in the first quarter, and then I think 9% in the second quarter, its most recent quarter. Now, a lot of retailers struggled. Demand has faltered a little bit in apparel overall. But yeah, Banana Republic is just killing it right now. And that was the impetus for the story I did this week.
What actions did they take to get these numbers up after years of lagging behind?
Lauren, the crux of it is really this reinvention of their look, their style, their product offering. So for a really long time, Banana Republic was just sort of this run-of-the-mill mall retailer where you can buy blouses and pants and, very sort of commodified apparel that maybe you could find at Ann Taylor or Express or even the Gap. But last year, they released this sort of new campaign that has dictated their creative direction, and it's called Imagined Worlds. It's a nod to Banana's origin as a travel and safari apparel maker back in the 20th century. And it's a very richly styled, very specific aesthetic, adventure themed. So like safari jackets, cargo pants, utility vests, a little bit bohemian, very sort of utilitarian, but that's the style of it. And it's a really interesting look. And, one thing that I note in my story is that this look is not for everybody. Like it's no longer this commodified, sort of very easy, but also very boring style. In the past year, they've introduced this merchandise that's, I think, for the first time in a really long time, it's exciting. It's different. And the fact that it's not for everybody serves an advantage for Banana because it finally has a point of view.
So how does a company like Banana Republic, they're not as big as Gap or definitely not as big as Old Navy, but it's still a huge business. How do they manage something like that? I walked by the Banana Republic on Broadway in Soho in New York the other day and really noticed it really does have a point of view. The thing is, you're not seeing every single person on the street in recognizable Banana Republic clothes. It's not a phenomenon by any means. Is it that their fashion pieces have a really strong point of view and then they're still offering the easy skinny leg chinos and button-down shirts for people? And so the newness is drawing people in, but the basics are what is driving the underlying growth?
That is a really great theory, Lauren. I am not completely sure in terms of how they're merchandising stores, but I know that more than half of their sales come from Banana Republic Factory, which is, when I go on the website, it tends to be at least 50-60% lower prices than the mainline. Now, the product refresh in this new Banana Republic look, it's extended over to Factory too. But at Factory, there are stores and there's a website, obviously, but it's a much lower price point. And I think that continues to be a huge driver of their sales. I do think that having a notable sort of branding and having like memorable branding, even if the products that you carry in your store don't necessarily reflect the very sort of out there aesthetic that the branding presents, but even having that branding brings Banana, I think, top of mind for consumers. And so they would be more likely to walk into a store or check out the website. But the other thing to consider, Lauren, is the fact that this past year, we've just had insane demand for this kind of clothing. So it's clothing that you wear to the office. It's occasion wear, right? There's all these weddings and events, and Banana Republic has certainly benefited from this huge boom in demand. I think that's driving some of this growth.
The outlet store factor is really interesting because it's so much of the revenue, and you can't deny that. On the main stores, they've closed stores, and it sounds like they've also managed, because they've closed stores, they have all this revenue coming in from outlet. They've also managed to increase the price point of what people are buying in the mainline stores and reduce discounting. It's a very interesting strategy that I know most of these brands really rely on outlet, but they also really rely on discounting. And it feels like Banana has really leveraged the outlet in order to make the mainline stores look better.
Exactly. And I think in a way, outlet, their factory stores have been able to allow Banana to get away with having only 2 sales a year. That's sort of their cadence now. Instead of always having a sale, right now, Banana offers 2 sales a year plus some promotional events throughout the years, like Black Friday, they would obviously participate in. This is what the CEO, Sandra Stangl, told me. And it seems like you and I have talked about and written about promotions a lot and how difficult it is to not promote because it's such a driver of sales. But it seems like Banana's really doing it.
It's been a year since they launched this rebrand, but this is just the first step. It's always easier to move up when you're at the bottom. And so what is the next step of this turnaround? It's not done. They have to, first of all, sustain the growth as we're entering a recession, which is going to change consumer shopping habits. What did you learn about how they are going to kind of manage this next phase?
Part of it is becoming a larger lifestyle brand. Now, Sandra, the CEO, she comes from Restoration Hardware. So accessible luxury furniture store that's known for its retail experience and known for, creating this just very stimulating experience when you walk into a Restoration Hardware store. A lot of them have bars and they're actually really fun places to get a drink. And I think what Sandra has done really well is bring some of that to Banana Republic. And I think they're going to continue to improve that retail experience.
We're actually going to hear directly from Sandra on this.
I remember the first time I walked into a Banana Republic store, I think it was 1996. It was the Grant Street store. And I walked in and I think it was during the holiday season. They had a gorgeous red trench coat. And at that time, there were cashmere throws and some bed linens and, some tabletop. And, if it makes sense for us, perhaps.
They've already launched, in fact, a styling program that's in all of their stores. And now they're piloting a tailoring service in about 5 of their stores. And so we're going to continue to see improvement at the retail level, at the brick and mortar level. Sandra also said that she sees Banana Republic as a lifestyle brand, and that means new categories in the home space, potentially. Next month, they're launching Banana Republic Art, which is really interesting, a little bit counterintuitive. I mean, it's real pieces, exclusive photographs and prints from actual artists. They're going to run from $800 to $3,000. It's going to be like a legit art offering. I guess we'll see how that goes. I am a little bit skeptical that the Banana Republic customer who's buying the clothes and responding to the fashion right now would sort of seamlessly also be receptive to Banana Republic art or, something in the home space. But in the 90s, this retailer had the offering, right? They were doing tabletop and linens and things like that. And so that's definitely in store for Banana Republic, potentially. But I agree with you. I think that next year is when we'll really see whether this turnaround has been pulled off. Banana brought Ana Andjelic last year to be their chief brand officer. And she's an industry sort of branding veteran. And she was the one who basically spearheaded, along with Sandra, the Imagined Worlds campaign. And right now, the direction that we're seeing is still very much in line with this vision that she had created last year. But in November, she left the company. I spoke to her for this story, and she said that from the very beginning, she thought this would be a 3 to 5 year endeavor, meaning that it would take 3 to 5 years to really make change and see results from that change. And we're only 1 year in. So I do think that next year, the following year, will be the true test for whether Banana Republic has succeeded with this new look.
One thing I want to briefly touch on is the overall Gap Inc. strategy and where Banana fits into it. As we mentioned, it's a much smaller business. It's really not been a priority for them. But the other part of this is one thing that aligns with the broader strategy is this idea of they're not just sellers of clothes anymore. They're sellers of a brand that can sell art or home or what have you. Do you think that they'll end up selling Banana Republic to private equity or to another owner? They've sold off a lot of the other portfolio. Banana is a sort of in between. It was the second brand that the Fisher family bought after Gap, I believe, and it's been with the company since the 1980s. So it has this heritage with Gap Inc., but at the same time, it's not really aligned with Old Navy. Actually, I mean, in some ways, none of them are really super aligned anymore. Gap and Old Navy, I guess, still are complementary in some ways and in some ways not. And Athleta, there have been rumors that Athleta might be for sale. But do you think there's a chance they'll sell it? What do you think they'll do with Banana Republic, if either, regardless of whether or not the turnaround keeps working?
It certainly benefits Gap Inc. that they have this one asset that's performing really well. One detail in my story was that even though in this past earnings report that came out in late August, the rest of the company did not do well. Even Athleta was mostly flat in terms of growth. It was not a positive earnings report, but because Banana was up, and that was such a surprise and a delight that shares of Gap Inc. went up 6% after the report came out, which is really interesting. And so I think for the time being, it benefits Gap Inc. to have something good going on in the portfolio. And I think that maybe they can monetize it with the sale down the road. And it would have to be really down the road because I cannot see a sale happening right now where a potential buyer's like, oh yeah, 2 quarters of positive growth, that's enough for us, right? I think they'll have to prove themselves a little bit longer before that happens. But I also think that it's a really interesting case study for Gap. You know, you've written so much about this. You're really the expert on this topic, but Gap hasn't really truly re-examined the brand. You know, it hasn't really mounted a turnaround that's as substantial as I think this makeover that Banana Republic had. And so I think that certainly if things continue to go well, there's a lot of lessons for Gap Inc. itself.
It's a really, really good point. And I know that these are businesses we're going to be following for a long time. They're not going anywhere, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, yeah, ABG will gobble it up before it goes away. That's
that's another for another podcast, Pat. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, very illuminating. You have been listening to The Debrief, produced and edited by Emma Clark, Kate Barton, and Eric Bria in the BOF studio. I'm Lauren Sherman, and I'll be back next Wednesday with a new episode. Thanks so much for joining us, and be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts.
You can join BOF Professional today with an exclusive 25% discount on an annual membership covering key industry topics from sustainability to technology to marketing, with access to our case studies, live events, and iOS app. To get this special offer and benefit from 25% off of a membership, head to the link in the episode show notes or enter the coupon code DEBRIEF at checkout. Visit businessoffashion.com/memberships.